Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Priyam. I'm a student ambassador at Own Academy. For this interview, it's going to be a very special interview, and it's also going to be a very valuable piece of content for all the viewers who are watching this. The intent and the objective of the interview is to just briefly and basically introduce mental health, just to make sure that people are a little more sensitive, a little more empathetic, a little more aware and accepting about this issue, which is real and it exists, and this is high time that we start talking about it. And to share all of these insights today, we have with us Dr. K. Jyotirmay. She's a neuropsychiatrist, a therapist. She's been helping people with their mental health issues over the past 8-10 years now. She also runs a blog named Live Happy, wherein she regularly writes articles about these issues. So you can definitely go and check that out as well. She's available for in-person consultation at the Continental Hospital, Hyderabad. So you can reach out to their website and book your appointment. And for virtual consultations, you can also book sessions through drjyotirmay.com, wherein she's available for online virtual consultations as well. So that is a brief introduction that I've given. Now I'd like you to introduce yourself, ma'am, and the work that you've been doing.
Hi, Priyam. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Dr. Jyotirmay. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. So I deal with mental health issues, mental health disorders and concerns. We as psychiatrists, we treat the disorders like mood disorders, psychotic disorders, substance use disorders, etc. Also, we deal with children having ADHD, autism spectrum disorders. So our range of treatment ranges from usage of medications to non-medical therapies. So parallelly, based on the severity, we either prescribe medications or we start with psychotherapy sessions. So as mental health professionals, our team also consists of psychiatrists, come clinical psychologists and counselors. Who the clinical psychologists and the counselors mostly they deal with the talk therapy or the counseling part and the behavior therapies, etc. That's how broadly we are run. Since the COVID has started, I think the scope for teleconsultations has increased a lot, and even mental health issues, mental health concerns have increased a lot. So people are suffering with a lot of stress, trauma, a lot of changes because of the pandemic. So I think we can throw light on some issues during this session.
Definitely. We'll be discussing about those issues. Ma'am, you mentioned that parallelly you have psychologists and counselors, and then you have psychiatrists. Can you briefly explain the difference between them?
Yeah. See, psychiatrists are medical doctors. That is, they finish their MBBS and after that they do their post-graduation in psychiatry, their MD or diploma in psychiatry. And that is how they can also prescribe medication. So they are basically medical doctors. So then we have clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists. So they mostly deal with the assessments of psychological disorders and psychotherapy or talk therapy, we can say broadly. So they will be dealing with the counseling sessions mostly.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So to begin with the discussion, let's start with the very basics of what exactly is mental health. Because unlike physical health, wherein our body will give us signals in terms of discomfort or pain, and then we are able to identify, okay, we are having an issue, we need to do something about it. But what exactly is mental health, and how does someone know that they're having an issue?
Yeah. See, mental health is about how people think, feel, and behave in a particular situation. So, psychological and emotional well being is what is called as a good mental health and able to regulate our emotions. And, rightly said, physical problems are something which are visible, and mental health issues are something which the person feels or the other person sees in the change in their behavior patterns. And because of lot of stigma associated with mental health, usually these issues are not often discussed upon, and people don't often come out openly, trying to discuss about it. So there is a delay in the treatment of these issues also because of the stigma and late identification. But good mental health and good physical health both together constitutes complete well-being of a human being, and in society as such also, because of persistent mental health issues. There can be constant conflicts and stress within the family and in the workplace. So indirectly, it is affecting a lot of issues. So it is high time that we include mental well-being and mental health in all the spheres of field, like in schools, colleges, in offices, etc. Awareness is very important to spread.
Okay. So as you said, ma'am, that it is like psychological and emotional well-being, and there is stigma associated with it. It's important to identify it early on and then start off with the treatment. But let's say a person identifies that they are having an issue, notices certain changes or patterns in their behavior, or they are feeling low. Right. The first step is to just like all of us just go on Google and then search that this is how I'm feeling, and then certain articles come up, and then we try to self-treat ourselves. A, is it advisable? And B, at what point of time does one need to reach out to a professional for help?
Yes, that's a good question. See, it's is it advisable means Googling and trying to see the symptoms. There is nothing wrong in it. See, especially if a person is having low mood, no interest in activities, low energy levels, or a lot of panic symptoms, anxiety symptoms, irritability, aggression. So if he wants to understand what is wrong with him, that is a good thing. That means that particular person has insight into his problem and trying to Google.
Okay.
But after Googling, the problem comes when they start self-treating as well. So trying to understand ki, maybe if they have a basic idea after Googling ki this is depression or this is anxiety or this is a substance use problem, then they need to approach the proper professional, or they need to ask help if they are unable to decide from a friend or a family member. And based upon the severity of the symptoms, they can maybe initially go to a psychologist or directly approach the psychiatrist as well. So here we have seen many people coming with mild symptoms. Maybe they start self-treating, like seeing some blogs or trying to follow some usual exercises. See, there's nothing wrong in it, but beyond a point, if at all the severity we feel is increasing, and especially that can be seen when there is impairment of functionality. Impairment of functionality, broadly we can categorize into one, biological functions. That is when the person is not eating properly, person is not sleeping properly. That means the person needs attention, medical attention. Second, when occupational functioning is impaired, person is not doing well at the office, not able to concentrate, and lot of issues, his work quality has come down. So then it becomes necessary that they have to meet someone. Third, interpersonal functioning or marital functioning, it is getting affected. They're not able to manage properly their family relations, and there are a lot of conflicts within the family on a daily basis. Then maybe both of them have to approach a mental health professional. Fourth, social functioning. Let us say the person is completely withdrawn and doesn't want to go attend any social gatherings and doesn't want to talk or receive calls from friends or family. Even that indicates he or she requires professional treatment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So as you said, ma'am, that the understand up till the understanding parts, it's okay. But at after a point of time, if the symptoms become severe, then it's important to reach out to a professional. And as you said, that biological, occupational, social, and what was the last one?
Interpersonal functioning.
Interpersonal. So these are certain indicators that could give an idea to the person that okay, something is wrong, then and we need to do something about
Yes.
it. Okay.
See, that is for functionality. If it is affected for a period of time, mostly we take 2 weeks as the duration to understand that it is a disorder. Generally, for all disorders, it's if it is crossing more than 2 weeks. See, now and then we all experience sadness. We all become anxious. See, 2 or 3 days,
Right.
if something happens, someone says something, someone criticizes us, we do feel sad. That doesn't mean that is depression or we are having a disorder. But if we are able to regulate those emotions after 2 or 3 days and get back to our normal self, that's okay. But if these functionality impairments are persisting for a longer duration, that means, yeah, they require help.
Okay. And as in these episodes, if they're frequent, then they require help. Like if you're
Yes.
able to regulate it in a short term, then everything's fine, right? Okay. Now let's say a person comes to help to a professional, like an in-person visit or an online session as well. What does a usual therapy session include? Like, is it about prescribing medications or certain terminologies? Like I was reading in the website of yours was psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, if you could just walk us through what a therapy session looks like.
Yeah. So therapy session, first it can only happen after the consent of the individual. So first we assess the individual as to where the person fits in, based on the severity, whether immediate any medications are required or parallelly medications and psychotherapy are required, or whether the person can be managed only with psychotherapy. So based on that, we try to first psycho-educate the individual of what a therapy session is. So therapy sessions usually are different kinds. So there are something called a cognitive behavior therapy session, which focuses on the current problems, and some psychodynamic therapy sessions, which also focuses on the cause of the problem of the individual, goes back and all. So sometimes the therapy sessions can be short, like brief psychotherapy. Sometimes they can extend to months to years also.
Okay.
So in these sessions, usually, first of all, the rapport should be established well with the therapist. And the therapy session is all about for the individual to be aware of what exactly is wrong with them. So that's the whole concept here. The individual has to understand what are the negative thoughts or the thought errors that the individual is having, and what are the negative behaviors or the disruptive behaviors that they're having. So at least they should accept, and they should understand that these are the problems that the individual is having. So trying to make them aware of their thoughts, their emotions, and the negative behaviors that they are having, and then trying to teach them how to respond to these challenging situations by trying to teach them some coping skills, and trying to modify their thought errors that they're having, trying to modify the thought behaviors by giving some homework assignments to them, by teaching them some relaxation exercises. And if it is obsessions, we have something called as exposure response prevention therapy. So trying to systematically, get them exposed to low fear causing stimuli to high fear causing stimuli, trying to reduce social phobias with different kinds of therapies. So it's a little bit of it, what we can say, it's a little bit time consuming, and we don't expect results in one session or two sessions. Based upon the individual, based upon this, we also try to modify the sessions after a few sessions, whether the individual is improving or not, when to terminate the session. So it's all about the talking and teaching them some skills and some exercises, and that is how what psychotherapy is all about.
Okay. Okay. So initially you start off with understanding the patient, telling them about their thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and then starting off with certain exercises. So it's a long-term thing, right? The patient also
Yeah,
needs
like
to have
it
patience.
depends. Sometimes we also have brief psychotherapy, which
Okay.
can just go for 4 to 6 sessions as well. But sometimes individuals also require longer therapy sessions.
Okay. But all of this, as you said, is treatable. So yeah, that is the
Yes,
actually
it's
the intent
treatable.
that yeah.
There will be improvement, but it's all like a case by case scenario. It can differ.
Okay. And what point does medication come into picture, ma'am? Like, is it only for severe symptoms cases?
No, medications usually, see, broadly, if we can classify as mild, moderate, severe. So depression, let us say, if only mild symptoms are there and the person wants to just go for therapy, we continue. But let us say symptoms according to our assessment are moderate level, where the duration is more, sleep is also affected, and the intensity is little bit more, then we also suggest them medications. Some do want to try for therapy because of the stigma of medications. They do not want to go for medications right away, but we try to explain them the risks and benefits associated with it. And these are all antidepressants are all non-addictive pills. They are not sedatives or sleeping pills. So they benefit the individual definitely. These are all evidence-based and research-based medicines. So for moderate and severe levels, we definitely do prescribe them medications.
Okay. So as you said, there's nothing wrong with taking medication. It's just a myth, as you said, right?
Yes, just like diabetes and hypertension, which are medical illnesses. Likewise, because of neurochemical imbalances, we get some anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia, etc. So there are neurochemical imbalances of serotonin, dopamine levels. So these medications are there to regulate them.
Okay. Okay. Coming to the next question, ma'am, as you mentioned schizophrenia right now, there are certain terms that are very frequently used. Like somebody says that, oh, I'm feeling anxious, or that person is feeling depressed, or that person is bipolar, or I'm having OCD. All of these terms, especially when people reach out to the elder people in their family for help, they are not able to understand these terms. So if you could just briefly give us an idea about the most frequently used terms, so that at least we can have a little bit of sensitivity towards people around who are having these issues.
Yeah. See, most commonly, we have what is called as depression, or in our medical terminology, major depressive disorder is what we call. So here the core symptoms are low mood, loss of interest in pleasurable activities, low energy levels. These are the three cardinal symptoms. If they are persistent for more than 2 weeks, we say that the person is having depression.
Okay.
Along with this, there can be loss of concentration, sleep issues, self-harm ideation, suicidal ideation, ideas of guilt, hopeless ideas. These are all the other symptoms of depression as well. Another most commonly seen is anxiety disorders. In anxiety disorders only, we have obsessive compulsive disorders, we have generalized anxiety disorders, we have social phobias. So in obsessive compulsive disorders, it is obsession is nothing but a repeated intrusive thought which keeps on coming, and if we try to resist that thought, a person gets very anxious. Compulsions or compulsive behaviors are because of the obsessive thoughts, a person is made to do certain acts again and again. For example, if a person is having an obsessive thought that there is contamination of his hands, then the compulsive behavior that the person does is repeated washing of the hands again and again, washing of the hands. So it, based on the severity, they can do it for half an hour or few hours also for few individuals. So this is what is OCD. In that, washing rituals is one of the things. There can be other checking behaviors, there can be other obsessions as well. Then we have social phobias or specific phobias. People will have a extreme fear of certain things. Like it could be going out in social gatherings, extreme fear of heights. So specifically also they can have fear. So what they do is they try to avoid the fear causing stimuli. So people try to avoid social gatherings. If they have social phobia, they try to avoid going to heights if they have phobia of height. So like that, there can be several phobias. In these phobias only, we also have something called as agoraphobia, wherein these people will have a lot of panic symptoms when they are in places where escape is not possible. That is what they feel, like in overcrowded places or in very closed spaces when they feel that help is not available. So they can get panicky. So this is also one kind of phobia. So then we have generalized anxiety disorder, where in general only for every situation, unnecessary, every trivial thing, also the person gets very anxious. The person is always thinking about the future, what is going to happen and all. So he is always in a very restless state, having anxiety symptoms of palpitations, sweating, tremors, coldness of hands, dry mouth, etc. And in anxiety disorders also, we have something called as hypochondriasis or somatic disorders, wherein the person is over concerned about their bodily symptoms. They get repeated investigations done to be very sure that they don't have any particular illness. So they are very much worried about their health, worried about the worst possible outcomes which can happen because of health. So these are some anxieties that people can have. And then we have substance use disorders. Substance use disorders is about consuming alcohol or cigarette smoking on a daily basis in excess amounts, where they get dependent on it, and because of this there can be other psychological issues as well. Then we have psychotic illnesses. Psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia, when they have these hallucinations and delusions which are predominant. Hallucinations is hearing imaginary voices which only that person can hear, not the other people around them. Delusions is believing something firmly, even though it is against it, like believing someone is trying to harm them, though there is no proof for it. So, or believing that the spouse has infidelity issues, such delusions the person can have. And then we have bipolar affective disorders. It is a part of the mood disorders only. in which there will be a lot of mood fluctuations. The mood fluctuations can go to lower moods like depressive episodes, what we had talked earlier, and there can be other side of the fluctuations when there can be elated mood, irritable, aggressive mood, grandiose ideas, thinking very great about themselves, disinhibited behavior, talking a lot. So this is what we call as mania. So manic episodes and the alternating depressive episodes, that is what we call as a bipolar affective disorder. Then we have something called as personality disorders. In personality disorders, we have several. The most commonly, we have one thing called as borderline or emotionally unstable personality disorders, where their ability to regulate their emotions is less, their self-image is very less, impulsive behavior is more, their episodes of depression also is more. So this is borderline or emotional unstable personality disorders. Then we have depressive, dependent personality disorders. So like that, we can categorize it and we can identify them.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I have a lot more idea about about all of these issues, and I'm sure the viewers will also have a lot more idea. I understood all the parts. The part that you talked about OCD. So the example that you gave is that, for example, a person is obsessed about cleanliness, and then the compulsion associated with it is repeatedly washing their hands, right? So,
Yes.
but to us it seems very basic. Like, what is wrong with washing hands even if you're doing it frequently? How does it become like an issue?
Yeah, it's about the frequency. See, like once or twice I have washed my hands is okay. But after washing, after I sit down again, feel that the contamination is not gone. Again, go back. So I repeatedly do it several
Okay.
times. Like the majority of my time is being consumed with this. And even if I'm sitting somewhere, I keep thinking about maybe I have not washed it properly. So my predominant thoughts are going towards it, and excess amount I'm spending doing it again and again in several situations. So these are all very gradual onset. That is, suddenly a person will not get OCD for this thing. Maybe over the months, over a few years, slowly it keeps on, increasing. It could be
Okay.
just a mild obsession initially, but when it increases, it is evident to the other family members, and to that person also it is distressing. He cannot concentrate on other issues. He keeps on thinking about the washing hands only.
Okay. So as it gets moderate to severe, it actually impairs the quality of life as well.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And you talked about personality disorder and bodily symptoms as well, ma'am. So does, like, in a lot of people, specifically in this generation, specifically the teenagers, they are very concerned about how they look.
Yes.
Like, what would be your advice to those kind of people?
Yeah. See, when you mention about teenagers, definitely they are going through a stage of psychological development where we have something called Erickson's development stages, where this particular teenage, they are confused between identity formation and confusion. So
Okay.
their identity formation is very important at this stage. So how they identify themselves is either with their appearance or their academic performance or their social background. So these are some of the things that a
Okay.
person identifies. So lack of self image can occur when they feel that they're very conscious of their appearance, like how they look. They see movies, they see
Yeah.
models and actors and
Exactly.
actresses. So they try to they analyze it and try to see about the skin color, about the shape of their eyes or nose, about the hair, about their height, weight, everything. So they think that being perfect is equal to being beautiful, how they look on screen and all. And even with social media these days, what is happening, see, we all display our profile pictures, and we try to edit in such a way that we want the other person to see us in a particular way, so we try to
Exactly.
portray that images. So when teenagers, because of the online classes or because of the thing, when they try to see their friends and the other family members and see the very good self and the number of likes they are getting, and they try to see themselves in the mirror and try to dislike themselves, especially with the I think in Indian context we have something called the color thing, dark
Exactly.
skin and fair skin. So they might feel very low about themselves. They unless and until this is addressed in schools and colleges from the beginning, I think much change won't be possible. At least from the family point of view, the parents should be able to address this, or the teachers in schools and colleges, they should start addressing these issues about how the looks and all are either they are that important or what exactly makes an individual. And another thing is bullying and peer pressure. This is one thing which causes this low self-esteem. So when the bullying starts in schools and colleges, we see many people who are left short height and all the other people, they start bullying them. So from then only their low self-image starts. So I think it's important to address this issue, to understand if you are bullied, speak about it, talk to someone about it, tell your authorities like your teachers or your parents so that they can address it properly. Because we have seen a lot of low self-image issues in adulthood. And when we retrospectively go back and ask, there are definitely these issues of bullying, based upon their height or skin color or their religion or their caste or their economic background. Yeah, people, if we go back and think, yeah, maybe sometimes every one of us might have got criticized or bullied in some aspect. So I think as the educational institutions and all can throw some light on it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as you said, ma'am, that from a very young age, if somebody is conditioned to think a certain way, that thought becomes embedded in their mind like very strongly, and then it's very difficult to change that. So if we start initially from the school level itself, then it's possible to get certain changes. Uh, and that brings me to my next question, ma'am, and I personally want to ask this as well. Like a lot of the motivational speakers or a lot of books also talk about this, that when you're going through a low phase or you're having certain issues, you should resort to meditation or spirituality, yoga, read self-help books. I have two questions on this. Uh, like if a person is going through an issue like this, first, it's very difficult to sit for a meditation session or pick up a book and read. So how to convince their mind in such a situation like that to take up these productive activities? And B, what do you think, to what extent does all of this help?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. See, usually this meditation and all, maybe it doesn't help everyone, but for few individuals, it is definitely helpful.
Okay.
Here again, it is based upon, let us say, for example, a person is having depression, lot of depression, he has no interest in life itself. Asking that person, you sit and
Yeah,
meditate, might
yeah.
not help. At that particular point of time, what is required is some physical action. So physical exercises are what are recommended in the initial stage. When little betterment is there, then we can recommend meditation. That is concentration on particular thing and focusing and all. But initially, what is required is the body is supposed to move around. So if the person is just sitting and trying to overthink and all, simple yoga exercises where the whole all the body parts are moving, at least 10 minutes or 15 minutes of some physical exercise daily is recommended. Some breathing exercise of 5 minutes is recommended. So let the physical body also move and participate in the betterment. Then later stage comes eating well. Are you eating properly or not? Proper timings are you maintaining? Sleep is a very important thing again. Are you sleeping properly? 7 hours of average sleep in the night are you getting or not? When these basic biological functions of an individual are set right, okay, then we can talk to them about meditation, how to do, and other spiritual activities and all. Then they'll be able to focus also much better.
Okay. So initially physical action is recommended, and then gradually you can move on to taking up
Yes,
these
yes,
activities,
physical
right?
action and whether body is getting proper food, proper timing, whether body is getting proper sleep. These basic biological needs have to be fulfilled first.
Okay. Okay. Now we have an idea. Okay. The next question, ma'am. So before this interview, I was talking to a lot of my friends and my relatives about questions that they would want to ask. And one very interesting question that came up was implicit memories attribution to mental health issues. So for our viewers, to make it a little more understandable and clear, for example, if somebody's had an accident on Tuesday, now they would attach that negative event to Tuesday. Now every Tuesday, whenever they are traveling, they are feeling that they are at the risk of having an accident. Now logically that does not make sense. But that happens specifically in Indian context also. Like if a cat crosses the path, we attach that with a negative event. So what do you think is the solution, ma'am? What's the way out of this?
Yeah, see, these are something what we call as superstitions, which are culturally ingrained. So, culturally, since many years together, there are some things that people believe ki these are good days, these are bad days, or these are good things, good omens, and all. So, these are beliefs. These are beliefs. Unless they are very disruptive to everyone, maybe it doesn't cause much harm because the
Okay.
individual is okay with it, the family is okay with it, though they go about. But when it sometimes it becomes excess, excess believing, excess superstitions, getting more orthodox, or trying to let us say this particular person believes that every day only if a particular timing. See, there was this one patient of mine who had this belief that a particular dress was lucky for that particular person. So almost every day he used to wash the same thing and used to wear it and go to the office, because he had this we can tell it went to a delusion level wherein he firmly believed that any other dress would cause harm to him.
Okay.
So sometimes when the particular severity increases like this, they might require therapy sessions as well, sitting and discuss with them, because they are not able to come back to their normalcy. That is also an obsession. That is also an obsessive, and this is also a compulsive behavior of wearing the same thing again and again, because otherwise they are not able to come back to normalcy. So yeah, so in limitations, I think, which is like culturally accepted and all, there is we can go with the flow because it depends upon their faith and their beliefs. But otherwise, if something is disrupting the person's routine life, they might require help.
Okay. So if it's like very basic and you're okay with it, then it's okay. But if it becomes like an occurring issue, then
Yes,
you
it
need
is
to.
very basic, like you do puja daily for 5 minutes, then it's going to do some good to my family. It's not causing harm to anyone. So the person is okay with doing it. If it is going to feel them, it's a feel good factor too.
Okay. But otherwise, then people should seek for help, right?
Yeah, otherwise, if at all their actions are in such a way that it is causing harm to the other individual, other family members are getting distressed because of it too much, that is an indicator to understand that there is something wrong and requires treatment.
Okay, okay, got it, ma'am. Okay, the next one is, it's a very dark question, but I had to discuss this because personally, in my life also, I've seen a couple of my people who have committed suicide. So, and I know for sure that everybody has heard of some person or the other committing this act. So, ma'am, what happens? How does someone get to such a low phase in life that they are contemplating suicide? And from the exterior to us, it seems that that person is having an okay life. So how as people, we around them, could help them?
Yeah. See, suicide and self-harm, these two things, again, we should be able to differentiate. See, in suicide ideas, people will want to definitely end their life. And it could be a part of the depression disorder that they are going through. They have contemplated it for a while. They have had hopeless ideas and all. Or it could be because of a major catastrophic event in their life. Suddenly something happened, like someone lost their near and dear ones, and they feel that their life is not worth, and that particular point they try to think about suicide. Or sudden financial losses, they have got into debts and all, and they have so they also think about ending their life because they don't find any solution to it. So sudden major catastrophic events can make the person feel so. And sometimes depressive disorders, ongoing depressive disorders, bipolar affective disorders, these mood disorders also can make the person to think so. And another spectrum, we have something called self-harm behavior. Sometimes people just maybe have cuts on their hands, or trying to head bang themselves, or these are minor self-inflicting injuries they do. It is a self-directed anger, so it is not like real suicidal behavior but self-harm behavior. It can happen in some personality disorders like borderline personality disorders, and other personality disorders or substance use disorders. People are addicted to alcohol and all, they can have some mood changes, they can resort to it. So try how we can identify it is in our near and dear ones. If we see there is sudden withdrawal behavior in some individuals, or suddenly someone has become very calm, or suddenly someone is talking about death, talking about there's no purpose of their living, talking about passive ideas of suicide, or people who are suddenly going and meeting their family and friends, or making will suddenly. So these all can be indicative that there's something wrong with the person. And sometimes we have this notion that we should not ask anyone whether they are contemplating suicide, because if we ask again, they might, feel bad about it or something. But we have found that asking an individual about what is this, do you feel hopeless about life? Do you really feel suicidal? At times when we have a doubt, actually makes them to vent out their feelings. They suddenly break up and they suddenly talk about it. Ki, yeah, this is what I am feeling. Because it's not very often talked in our society. So
Exactly.
asking for the problem, for the particular problem, most of the times, maybe not all will vent out, but many individuals, we can at least put that effort to ask the individual and encourage them, reassure them, and if required, immediately give them proper medical assistance.
Okay. Yeah, that is, I think, a very good answer, ma'am, because now that we could have certain indicators to look out for, and then we can reach out to that person and ask if they're going through certain issues, could actually help that person. And as you said, that these are very strong triggers that lead a person to start thinking that way, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we are nearing towards the end of the interview. Just a couple more questions, ma'am. One is that a lot of countries, including India, we are going through a COVID outbreak right now. Most of us are in a state of lockdown. We are staying at home, and especially during these times, a lot of the people are having mental health issues. Like our mental health stability is not there. So, what are your pieces of advice? How to keep our mental health stable during the lockdown? Because majority of the time we are spending at home. So, yeah.
Yeah. See, one thing is we'll have to understand and accept that we all are, sailing on the same boat. We all are facing the same storm. So sometimes accepting and acknowledging this fact will make us feel better, rather than thinking that, I am suffering, I'm sitting at home, I'm not able to do anything. But if you see in the larger picture, I think humanity as such, everyone is going through the same phase now. And
Okay.
then trying to use the possible resources available to us for proper communication, getting in connect with our family and friends through technology, daily allotting time to talk to a few friends and family. And if you're not able to, maybe try to verbalize your feelings through via telephone, voice messages, or text messages. Some people cannot voice their feelings, so they can text to their near and dear ones if they're feeling very frustrated with life. And they can distract themselves by doing household chores, like maybe most of us might not have maids during this lockdown and all.
Exactly.
So good distraction is doing household chores, cleaning up activities, cooking, taking care of the kids and all, rather than sitting idle and thinking about what's going to happen. So I think focusing on the present, and people, that would help out. And for people who are have to spend more time on screen, like screen time is more, I would advise them to take a 15 to 20-minute breaks in between. Get out from the chair, just move around, have some water, go to the washroom. So sometimes just sitting there also sometimes is causing a lot of bodily, postural changes, muscle pain issues to individuals, eye strain and all, which can cause fatigue, irritation at a later stage. So that is very important. And trying to focus and give more attention to the eating habits also, because you're at home only, so you think that whenever you can eat and all. So trying to have a lot proper timings for eating. Finally, it's about following proper schedule. Self care also, taking bath in the proper time. Just because you're at home doesn't mean that you're not going out, so you can just while away your time. So trying to make yourself feel good by your proper self-care, wearing good clothes, maybe even in the house, and trying to connect with individuals, and trying to extend a helping hand to individuals who are suffering outside by whatever way possible. That's also a feel-good factor for us. Maybe you cannot go out and in person help everyone, but in whatever way possible you can help. Maybe it's an encouraging word, or maybe financial help, or maybe with your contacts you can provide some assistance to other individuals. So that is the need of the hour.
Okay. Yeah, as you said, ma'am, that expressing and verbalizing our feelings, connecting with people, indulging in activities, taking regular breaks, and then helping people in whatever capacity we can. These are certain factors that we can resort to, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the last question for you, ma'am, is what would be your final piece of advice or immediate actionables that you would suggest to any person who's going through an issue? What should that person immediately do?
See, the immediate thing, what I would do is ask for help. Asking for help is very important. Two things here. As a human beings, help and ask for help. If someone needs help, that is what is the need of the hour, is what I feel now. Because majority of the timings, unless you tell about your problem, the other person wouldn't, because everyone is too busy in their own problems, their own issues. Every person actually is coming with their own burden or baggages, I feel. See, they think that, oh, there's so many works to do and all. So most of the times we don't have time to pause and think about the person nearby, whether that person is having any issue. So unless the person comes and talks to us, maybe we'll able to understand, okay, this is the issue. So asking for help is the primary thing, and please don't hesitate doing it, because when you ask, I think majority of the individuals will definitely get help, but asking is the primary thing.
Okay. So as you said, the immediate thing is to ask for help, not to hesitate, and reach out to any person that you can. And I'm sure that with time we'll start accepting this. The stigma around mental health would be gone, and we'll start discussing more openly about it. And that is the intent of doing all of this. Thank you so much, ma'am. That brings us to the end of the interview. We are very grateful to you for giving us this time.
Thank you, Priyam. It was very good talking to you as well. And I wish it helps out to some individuals who might be needing some help. There are many helplines also available, government helplines and other helplines. And we are also, thinking about starting a helpline. So I think resources are available now, so they can easily available also. And if you're confused that what to do and all that, I think always a friend or a family member will be able to search for the proper resource and help you out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So to
Okay,
all the
Priyam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.